Hello, my name is Elena Mahoney Sanchez. I am a Spanish artist based in Barcelona, and I'm thrilled to be part of this new sketchy challenge 30 Faces 30 Days 2023 edition. I'm going to be sharing the process of 3 watercolor portraits, starting out with a already made drawing. We're gonna focus on color mostly. We are learning to create value and volume through layers and layers of watercolor, of pure color, but also we're trying to combine the realism of the portrait of the reference picture. We're going to have to translate what we see through a lens of intense saturation and try to build a versatile, intuitive and obviously saturated and chromatic portrait, because that's what my portfolio is mostly known for. In this class we're doing Natia Loon picture. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing her name right, but at first glance I would say it's a pretty simple reference picture. It doesn't have that many harsh shadows or bright highlights, but we're going to have to look through the portrait a bit further and create the interest point in the portrait. And yeah, I hope you find it interesting, you enjoy the class, and yeah, let's get started. Hello and welcome to another watercolor portrait. I am going to firstly do, as always, a rundown of the materials I'm going to be using. So for the brushes, I am going back with one big flat brush to do some geometrical, nice clean edges, a big round brush and a smaller version of that same brush for very small, thin details. I'm using my Schmincke watercolor palette. I'm going to clean it up in just a minute. Obviously water and a absorbent material. I'm using paper towel, but you can use any sort of tissue absorbent, something that will absorb the excess water out. So for the paper, I'm always using the same, like I discovered what I like most, what I like best with watercolor. I'm just sticking to it. This is Arches 300 grams cold press 100% cotton watercolor paper. I recommend investing in good quality paper. I think it's the quality of your paper gives much a better look than investing in the best watercolors in the market. Like, you can buy pretty average watercolor palette, but if you use a shitty paper, it is not going to work. So yeah, I'm gonna clean my palette real quick. It's using clean water and a big brush. So I apologize for the lightning. I try not to record any lessons in partially cloudy days because it makes the lightning a bit messed up, but I can't really do anything about it, so I'm gonna have to work with what we have. For this reference picture, oh, sorry I didn't mention, I'm starting out with a already made, well yes, I said it in the intro, but basically I want to be honest, I actually traced this sketch because I want to jump right to the painting. I would say I'm pretty good at drawing, so obviously if you want to get good at it, I suggest you practice and don't use tracing as an excuse. But I do sometimes trace my drawings whenever I think I want to start right now, just not wasting any time. I'm gonna start. So okay, what we noticed about this reference picture is that I edited it a little bit just to get rid of the general redness. I want to pay attention to the nose and the eyes. Not quite that much in the lips. I do like this green area in the chin, but I might leave the mouth sort of unpainted. I'm in an era right now, well I've been for the past year, that I like sort of ignoring certain features in the face. Sometimes their eyes, sometimes the nose. Mostly I keep the nose as it is because I really like the structure and how you kind of see a portrait only by seeing a defined nose. But yeah, we see a lot of reds, yellows and some greens here in the chin and in the sides of the face. I'm not sure if I'm gonna do the neck. I think I'm gonna do just as the other class, just leave the floating head. Because not only is it easier for me to record that, but also it looks good. Let's get started. I'm gonna go straight with the red. It doesn't matter if this first stain looks super impulsive, because not only the watercolor will dry much lighter and basic than you expect, but also we will layer up more colors on top, so it's not going to look red. This is just a base color. You need to understand watercolor as building up rather than slowly defining everything. So I would see even in the highlight part of the nose, it's a pinkish color, so I'm just going to do that same red all around the nose. Maybe bring this a little bit up. I'm going to use that same red for this part of the corner of the eye. Again, we're working with the base color. Normally I do yellow as a base because it is like the lightest value in color. You can do an undertone for the whole painting. It will bring a lot of harmony to all the painting. I like doing, in my first recording, I did sort of a one color base layer of yellow and then let it dry and just work on top of that. But I realized that my favorite way to paint is just building up from white. At least I'm pretty happy, very happy with how my last painting turned out, so I'm gonna try and replicate what I did last time. It's just fascinating how whenever you paint, you're always surprising yourself. Like I've been painting for the past maybe 10 years, 8 years, but still it's great when I'm impressed with my own work. Not always happens this way. Sometimes not really happy with my paintings, which is sometimes a bit frustrating, not gonna lie. I struggle a lot with my self-esteem, and just because it's so unpredictable, I sometimes fear that I'm not capable of whatever I'm doing, and it's a very emotional process for me, because if I'm not feeling proud, I sort of meltdown. Okay, I'm gonna use a bit more yellow. Just gonna not only work with this red, but also sort of bring other colors out. So I'm just mixing a little bit of green, a bit of yellow, some of this red that I got left on my palette, sort of create this edge, this crease. I really like this eye area because of how sculpture it looks. A bit more blue. Hope you can see my palette. It's very important what I do here. I think it's more important what I do here than what I do in my paper. Let's hope you can actually see what I'm doing, because I sometimes feel that it's so light what I'm doing at the moment, like such a low contrast. You can't really see. Trying to fight the urge to just go on top with a very big layer of red. You just want to build up very slowly. If it was for me, I would take longer to do my paintings. But because I am recording a class, I can't overdo it. I can't really spend 5 hours with this painting. But if it was for me, I would take it very slowly, just enjoy the process. Whenever I'm doing this sort of paintings, I remember why I started painting in the first place. I think I started creating a style back when I started university with my watercolors. I think it was the first time I actually enjoyed and felt comfortable with a process, and that is a watercolor portrait. Just felt so natural. So obviously when I look back at those portraits, I see so many mistakes, but I don't know, I just felt so nice, so therapy. Like it felt like therapy for me. So I'm trying to create a nice blend here in the nose, leaving a very clean edge there in the nose. Okay, let's do a purple, because I rather sometimes create one color mix here in the palette and just reuse it. So I'm mixing ultramarine with purple. Go. Mixing it up with this bit of yellow. I really like the combination of yellow and purple. I think it creates a very nice skin, not skin tone, but lovely colour. I recommend creating mixing swaps just to see what you can achieve with that colour that you have in your palette. Because something that I realized very early on in my career is that we get used to certain colours and it is really hard to step away from them. So yeah, I recommend trying different things that you wouldn't do normally to see what you can actually do next, new. Okay, I think it went a bit too far with this yellow. But anyway, it's going to dry out lighter, but still don't want to risk it. Not sure what colour to use for this sort of edge near the eye. Just going with the green, maybe add a little bit of purple. Be careful because I want to create a contrast between the light of the face and the darkness of the nose. So I'm gonna blend that out to get rid of this harsh purple. Do blue. Because why not? I think I'm doing a very big mistake. I'm mixing in my paper, which you should never do. And any sort of materials, actually. You should only blend in your palette, not in your paper. I'm afraid this is being a bit too dark. But yeah, just gonna work with it. Curse. See how it turns out. I recommend to do this first layer of the face a bit more intuitive. It doesn't have to be perfect. I recommend just taking it easy, analyzing the picture before starting out, and doing a very general work. So firstly, I want to gonna explain this real quick. Basically, whenever I want my brush to get just to blend something, whenever I see that my brush is just too dry, I don't go like this, because this way it will drip a lot of water. You won't only get your bristles wet, but hold your brush, so it will just, it's too much water, so don't do that. Instead, just put your brush just a tiny tip in your water, and if you think it's too much, twist it in the edge of the glass, and if you still think there's too much water, just dab it a little bit on your piece of paper, and then go with your color. The only time I put my brush in the water and do this is to get it clean. So yes, be careful not to soak your brush too much. I think one of the biggest mistakes in watercolor is the excess water. You think the more water you use, the more color you're working with, but it's all the ratio of pigment and water that really is gonna work out. So yes, be careful not to overdo the water amount. Also, a great way, like one of the reasons why I think watercolor, it's such an easy way to understand portraiture, and I think thanks to watercolor I understand a lot of color theory and how I build a face. It's because watercolor is a very slow process, and you can't really choose a color right away. Like, you don't look at the portrait and see, oh, this eye is sort of a greenish purple with a little touch of, no. You go very slowly, so you see a stain, you think, oh, that looks pretty red, so you go with a little thin layer of red. But then if you think it's too red, you look back at the reference picture, you say, oh, it looks actually a bit more purple than red. Then you can go on top with a purple layer. So it's a constant analysis of the portrait. You can always go back and redo something, and like these people believe that watercolor, you can't redo mistakes and you can't fix anything. But the thing is, because it's such a layered, slow process, you have enough time, enough process for you to actually see what the problem is and what you want your portrait to look. What I mean by this is that if you work slowly and be patient and just don't take big risks, the chances of you making an unfixable mistake with watercolor become very low. So yeah, even though watercolor can't be erased or painted on top of it, you're always gonna have to work with what you already done. Something that I hate with watercolor is like the texture of the paper. I really like, but sometimes it can look really terrible because it has such a good, like, rough texture, and the cotton of the paper. What sometimes would happen is that I try to create a nice and straight edge, but because the paper has so much texture, it will look sort of rough. So you need to use the perfect amount of water and pigment for this not to happen. It's a bit of a struggle. I struggle with it still after so many years. To be very careful with that. Obviously, if you like that effect, you can keep it, but I'm not a huge fan of it. Going straight with the green here. It's a bit too dark. It will do. Maybe a touch lighter, just going on top with a bit of water. It's important to respect the real colours you see in the reference picture, but because we are, well, I guess everybody struggled at the beginning to see the actual colours to match exactly right. I recommend you take it easy, so obviously analyze the colours that you see and don't be afraid to have fun with that base, that general tone of the portrait. I even try to saturate the colours that I like most and avoid the ones that I don't like. Obviously, we want to create contrast. We want more than one, maybe two, maybe three colours. And yeah, just don't worry about how exactly look alike to the reference picture it is. Spreading out the stain, just because I don't want to create any harsh edges. Deepen up the under eye, more purple. So I'm gonna have to get rid of the white of the eyes also. I think that gives a very natural look to your paintings whenever people try and leave those super light color in the eyes. It just doesn't look natural. At the moment I'm using not too much water, but more than I normally do. I'm trying to blend nicely and go slowly with my layers, but if you like your edges and you want to see those sort of water stains, distinguish them, I guess, you can limit your blending so that they can show a bit stronger. Said I wanted to leave the lips sort of unpainted, but I do think I need to give some color around the area, so I'm gonna go with my flat brush and try to create sort of a shadow. Feels like the lip. Not gonna respect the actual silhouette of it. What I mean by this is that I don't want the lips to look super defined. I don't have any masking liquid. I would like to keep certain parts of the highlights as white, with the white of the paper, but because I don't have any, I think I'm gonna have to be extra cautious with those parts. I think those highlights are going to make the portrait look finished, fleshy, and somehow glossy. So firstly, we need to get rid of all the white of the painting, so that those little touches of white really show. Bring this upwards into the nose. Nice blended, because I want to keep a contrast between the darkness of the edge of the nose and the highlight from underneath. Okay. I think I'm gonna go with my flat brush. Get quicker work. No, actually, I think I'm gonna work in the eyes a little bit more. They look pretty undefined. Not sure what to do to them. Because the reference picture, the girl is crying, her eyes look a bit red rather than blue. So maybe I'm gonna do this first little corner, sort of a greyish blue. It looks super dark at the moment because we're gonna add more darkness to around the eyes, it won't look this crazy. Don't go too harsh with the blue, because even though I firstly wanted to make them look greenish, I then realized that if our portrait is crying, a great contrast is making her eyes green, blue, and the white of the eye sort of pinkish, look more red than blue. Here I'm just creating depth and giving more saturation around the eyes. It may be a bit confusing at the beginning, but I'm sure that if you pay enough attention, you'll be able to understand where the shadows are. It seems a bit confusing because I think the portrait itself doesn't have a super high contrast level, so you need to be a bit more careful, observadora, just pay more attention. Obviously, you can go from general work to more particular specific work, like I'm doing. Obviously the top lid of the eye is going to look red and the bottom half more purple, but apart from that you slowly going to keep adding layers and it will look good. I always forget to do the forehead. I'm going to grab my flat brush and just do a layer of pink. Maybe add a little bit of yellow to the mix to make it look a bit more orangey. I think I really like the combination of orange and blue rather than pink and blue. So yeah, I'm just doing a orangey version of the pink. I'm gonna get rid of all the white except for the tip of the nose and the highlight from the eye. So just do this. It's extremely important to trust the beginning of your process. This is the part where I struggle the most to be confident in my skills. It's the thing with watercolor, you have to go very slowly. You need to understand and build slowly. So yes, I recommend being confident and trusting the process. Don't be afraid to layer on top of a complementary color. Like here I'm doing a red layer on top of a green layer, but because we're working with such thin layers of paint, they will work together to make a realistic tone. They won't mix basically, and it won't look bad. It will just neutralize a little bit that color. I think the only way to not have any like crusty edges created by the texture of the paper is by controlling your medium, using the right amount of water and pigment. Normally I like working my watercolors pretty dry, but I've noticed that whenever I don't use enough water it will look kind of crusty. It's hard to create those nice straight edges. So yeah, if you want to do a dry blending technique, you still need to add that perfect amount of water to your brush. So the thing I do is I will dab my brush into the water and just take the excess water out with my brush. And it also depends the amount of water you have already on your palette. If you're mixing a color and you already have a ton of water mixed into it, you should work with a dry brush. It's important to jump from one part to another because the watercolor needs some time to dry. It's not a good idea to work only in one area because it will end up looking all smudged up. So I recommend, if you do one layer or one stain, to leave it dry. Don't be impatient, and the best way is just focusing in one other section of the portrait. That way you will not only be quicker, but it will also sort of make you not get used to that same part of the face all the time. You can even use that same color in different areas. I leave the lips as they are because I can't really work more on them at the moment. Here I'm doing a ochre version for this edge of the nose because I don't want it to look extremely red, a bit clownish. As you can see, I still haven't used the smaller version of this brush because it's amazing how versatile it is. It is a very big brush and can have a lot of water in it, but you still can do a lot of details with it. I paint the face in general shapes. What I mean about this is that I don't focus in one feature. I jump one place to another, and I think this is the best way to understand your portrait. Because you normally, if you see something, you distinguish something that you could do to make your painting more realistic. Just do it. Don't wait for the occasion to start with the eyes. Just do it before you forget about it. The only reason why I picked this very thin brush is because it's very easy to do thin lines with it. Even though my big brush does wonders, the only thing that I struggle doing with it is thin lines. But I think it's just because it has so many bristles, it can have a lot of water, and it will sort of, I don't know, just a bit harder to do thin lines. The problem with small brushes, whenever you're working with watercolors, it's very easy for the brush to turn out super dry because it has so little hair that it will eventually dry out very quickly. So it's hard to blend and to keep spreading a color if it's not a super tiny area. So yeah, I recommend not blending with a small brush whenever you're using your watercolor. Sorry. It's amazing how you can do a whole portrait, a whole painting with just this round brush. It's so versatile, and for my first 2 years of using watercolor, I actually only used one brush, which was very similar to the one I'm using at the moment. So yes, you don't have to invest in a huge number of brushes. You can buy one round, medium-sized brush and it will work wonders. Something that I never actually realized is that you need to have a cohesive palette, but sometimes with watercolor it's not really necessary because we're mixing and we're layering and we're building up so much that I don't pay too much attention to what colors I'm using, but I normally pick always the same. So here I'm using turquoise, mixing, well, I already have a turquoise color, but if you don't, you just mix cyan, primary blue with light yellow. I'm using a little tiny touch of ochre and a lot of pink. Here I'm just adding a bit more green around the bottom part of the face. I'm being a bit more turquoise with it. I don't want it to look super lime green. If you don't want your green to look super saturated, I think the only thing you need to do is mixing different types of blue and yellow. In this case, I'm mixing my lightest blue with my lightest yellow. So if you want that color to look a bit darker, maybe mix ochre with ultramarine blue rather than cyan and cadmium yellow. But yeah, I wanted this first layer to be extremely vibrant, so it kind of contrasts with the pink of the lips. Who's using that purple for that bottom half of the lip and the bottom eyelash, bottom shadow of the eye. Whoops. Went too fast. The area was still too wet for me to work in. I think it is hard to know when you can use how impulsive watercolor is to your advantage. A lot of people like watercolor for how unpredictable it is, but I rather know how the paint is going to behave. So yeah, that's sort of a struggle to understand. It's a bit hard to create value at the moment because you need to know where the highlights, like where the lowest value and the highest value is. And when you try and doing this, understand this and adding the color, that's when it becomes a bit confusing. I normally never pay attention to the value when I'm working with watercolor because it's such a slow process of understanding the color, but you obviously need to see where the highlights and where the shadows are and just trying to understand what you want your highlights to look or what you want your shadows to look. But normally I focus in the color. If you don't know what color to use for a certain area, I just recommend seeing a little bit of how the hue, like what tone it has, if it's warmer or lighter. Just mix a bunch of colors together, create sort of a dirty version of a color that you know. Here I'm being a bit more risky with this purple in the eyes. I think I needed to give a bit more harshness to that lash line to finally give a little bit more contrast to where the eyes are. For the eyes, I'm gonna do just the same as I did last time. Just do a nice green that will look good with the rest of the painting. Make sure to keep those highlights nice and clean. Doesn't matter, like if you think it's too dark, remember you're gonna have to spread that stain around and that will make it look much lighter. And still you can always go on top with a piece of paper cloth. Or you can get your brush dry, try and go on top of it, so the brush sort of sucks the excess water pigment. And if it's still too dark for you, do this. Oh. No, I actually liked it be as darker. It might look a bit intense at the moment, but I think once we add more information around the face, more contrast around the eyes, it will eventually look fine. Like right now, the only thing that you can see very, very intensely are the eyes. But I hope that once I give more contrast into the nose, or I like match the intensity of saturation in the lips, it will look okay. I thought about not painting the eyebrows, but I thought it could give a bit more expression to the face, and if I'm not painting the hair and not giving her any eyelashes and even not painting the eyebrows, I think it will look way too weird. Okay, I thought it was a bit risky to leave the eyes like this. I'd rather go slowly and not regret it. So I'm just dabbing the excess green out, just painting a lighter version of green. Go slowly. I also like how sort of this stain kind of smudges around the eye, so that we can't really see a very defined line that cuts the white of the eye and the shadow from underneath. So I'm gonna spread this same purple upwards using this small brush because I don't want to do any mistakes. And because this green is still pretty wet, I don't want to go on top of it. I'm making the eyes look redder so that green from the eyes looks much more saturated. Nice contrast. You can even actually blend both together so you can't see where the eye begins. I'm gonna do the same for here. I want that highlight to really pop, so I'm gonna have to make the eyes look much more red. So here, as you can see, we need to get rid of the excess white around the highlight. And I think I'm going to give a bit more redness into the lips. So I got a purple to create sort of a harsher distinguish the limit from the upper and bottom lip. I'm using my small brush just to be a bit more precise, adding a bit more red in the corners of the eye of the lips, and sort of blending it upwards with a green to create a bit more like sculpture. Here I'm doing the same thing on the other side. Grabbing my bigger brush and mixing my scarlet with a touch of ochre that I already have on my palette, and really going with the pink in the nose because I can't hardly see the highlight. I should give a bit more pink to that blush. Blending it nicely with round motion, just spreading the stain around. Also turning the pink from the nose a bit darker so you can actually see the highlight from the tip. gonna add a bit more yellow to the undertone because I think I haven't really touched any of this green and this yellow, sorry. Can't really see the yellow, but I think I should. Here, I think I'm using yellow as a gradient from green to pink. I think because I was only using pink, green, a bit of turquoise, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I thought I needed to add a bit more warmth into that magenta, work with a little bit of more colors, just more variado, a bit more pink. Oh, I'm sorry, my vocabulary is a bit rusty. Just give a bit more color theory, a bit more warmth into the face. I think adding the green in the eyes really reminds me of one of my favorite painters. He does incredible watercolors that I'm extremely inspired by. His name is Benjamin Bjorklund. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it bad. I mentioned it in my other class. He does this very beautiful watercolors. I don't know how he does it, but I'm trying to learn a bit of his technique. I don't know, it's just mesmerizing. And what he does a lot is sort of a lot of turquoise and a lot of pinks, nicely contrast. So yeah, everything I can do that reminds me to his work, I am going to do. Oh, I forgot to explain actually how I never use black in my paintings. Especially in watercolor, I would never try and darken up a color with black. If you want to make a color a bit darker, just mix it with something else, mix it with a complementary color to neutralize a little bit of the saturation. But in this case, I use a very vibrant color palette, so I try never to use black because that way you will make the colors look super dirty. I rather building up color slowly layering different colors. As I said, mixing a layer of green over a layer of yellow and over a yellow of red. It will look good, it will look nice and fleshy. You really don't need to add any black. I have to get rid of certain bright parts of the portrait so that the whites, the highlights really pop. I forgot to mention how I keep my palette organized. I normally keep in one side the warm colors and the other one the cold colors. I keep one for my purples in the middle. Actually, I haven't explained the difference in my palette because I own four warm colors of red. So I have next to the ochre cadmium red, which is red, like warm red. Then in the middle, the second one is sort of a purplish, I think it's magenta. Yeah, it's magenta. Next to it I have like a scarlet pink. And then next to it I have a sepia sienna, burnt sienna red, like a brick red. I was complaining about the texture. I don't really like how my paintings turn out sort of dirty. I don't know how to explain it, but I actually do like the textures of the lips at the moment. I think it's because I layered so many unblended water stains. I think it looks pretty cool. Might blend it in the future, but at the moment I think I'm pretty happy with it. I recommend you explore different blending techniques. As I said, I like controlling the way the color is being blended and the direction it's being spreaded. So I do kind of a dry technique with circular motions, or leave a very thin layer of color, just as I did with the pink from the nose. So I create a sort of layered texture. You can totally blend every layer that you put on your paper. I like how it's turning out, but I think it looks a bit dirty. I don't know how to fix this. I'm gonna try and go on top very carefully with my brush. Don't try not to rush it. It's creating cleaner edges. I'm gonna do this purple again. Now that I'm especially painting with oil paint, I realize how layering, how glazing the watercolor technique is. I think part of the reason why it's looking a bit dirtier than I expected, it's because I added a lot of water in certain areas. Like, rather than fixing it with a piece of paper, I would go on top with more water. Try to smudge everything up. Smooth the harsh lines that I didn't like. I want the eyes to look somehow unfinished, but at the same time I want them to have depth. That's why I'm adding color, but not being super harsh with it. I want it to be distinguishable, but not super finished looking. Not adding that much information. That's what I mean. And adding a bit more pink into the lips. I still want to keep little highlights, so here I'm just doing a bit of texture to them. A bit more realistic, and adding that same pink into the cheek. Get rid of some of the white from the cheeks. And also, I don't want the features to be extremely red and the rest of the face very green, so I think I should bring some of that redness into the rest of the face. I don't know if you noticed, but I've tried painting the teardrop. Not very noticeable, just doing that shadow with that orange next to it. I don't know, I'm not being very careful with the decisions I'm taking. Spreading some of that orange around and diffusing the waterline, more of that purple into the eye, into the white of the eye. Spreading it downwards. A bit more pink. Adding a bit more shadow around the left part of the nose. And I think I should just bring a bit more pink in the general shape of the nose. So I'm just putting down a watery layer of pink, respecting obviously the highlight from the tip of the nose. Adding some purple in the middle, so you can see there's a shadow there. And I should wait. I thought about darkening the nostrils, but because it was already wet, I think I shouldn't do that. Here I'm just adding a bit more blue in the corners of the eyes to bring a bit more shadows. Like, even though I'm not gonna paint the top part of the hair, I still want the face to have some sort of depth. Going with my bigger brush to go with bigger stains. There's not really a point to be that careful at this stage in that part of the face. I'm not paying too much attention to the forehead. Doing a nice blend around the eyes and that side of the forehead. And I'm going to do that same purple that I was using moments ago, and to do some of the cheek area, just to darken up some of the shadows around the face to give more contrast to the face. Just create that shadow and sort of blend it out into the redness of the cheek. Also, getting rid of that white of the paper, it's key so that the highlights can really pop. Going with more yellow, I still think I need to add a bit more warmth to the face, and also more varied, I guess, with the color palette. So one of the ways that I like smoothing everything out, it's once it's dry, you pick your brush, a dry, clean brush, you sort of overwork the surface, just the way as you do with charcoal. It's pretty cool how sort of the roughness of the paper allows to sort of get rid of harsh edges, even if they're dry. Here I am just adding a bit more depth to the mouth area, adding sort of an ochre mixed with a tiny touch of blue, adding more contrast around the chin, just to like, it's not really defined, that area, but we know that in the corners of the mouth there's a blended shadow that goes into the end of the face. So I wanted to create that sort of depth into it. It doesn't seem like we're doing much at this point, because the general shape of the portrait is already done. But if you do a time lapse of the process, you can really tell how your portrait will slowly change. Here I'm using the shape of the brush to sort of create lines that define the end of the face. And for the ears, I'm doing the same thing as my last portraits, keeping them simple, just adding a saturated version of the color that we can actually see in the reference picture. We could go simply, like we could go with the same color palette as the rest of the face, but I thought it could give a good, nice touch of red to the portrait. Also going to grab that same red and bring it to the cheeks, make it warmer. I'm not gonna blend it. I like those edges, they give more texture to the painting. Adding even more red to the corner of the lips. I'm going with more green. I think I've been using green for a very short period of time, so I still need to figure out the variation of greens. But I think what I like most is turquoise green and a very yellowish green. But yeah, I recommend testing what colors you like best before you start your portrait, so you can decide what color palette you want your painting to have. Okay, I'm gonna grab my smaller brush, do this precise brush. It's okay if you need a bit more time to distinguish certain areas in the portrait. I recommend taking a walk, like stepping back from the painting, so that your eyes don't get used to the reference picture. I didn't have too much time for it, so I skipped this, but I normally, when I'm painting mid-through, or when I have just a few more steps to add, I will stop painting for a short period of time, and then when I come back, I sort of see much clearer what I have to do next, what I have to fix, or what I have to add. Okay, for the neck, I wanted to have that floating head, but I still want that floating head to have the shadow projected in the neck. I'm not painting the neck, just the shadow we can see in the neck. I'm mixing ochre with a little touch of blue. It might seem a bit darker, but at the moment I was thinking I was going to be able to spread it, but still I'm dabbing out the excess pigment in case I still think it's too dark. With a damped brush, I'm spreading the stain, not being extremely careful with how the shadow is shaped, just want that general colour underneath the chin. And sort of spreading the edge in the left corner. I'm actually wanted to look a bit warmer than this, but it looks fine. I'm going to take that same green and darken out the shadows from the lips. I don't know how we call that shadow, like the bottom lip shadow. I'm spreading out with my brush, getting rid of the excess paint, just using circular motions to spread it around. At this point, you're going to see me redo the same watercolor stains over and over again. Because the more you layer on top, the darker it, and the more texture and more depth you're going to add. I'm not working with very solid color. I'm using very glazy layers of paint. That's why I'm just going over and over on top of certain areas. And please don't be afraid to paint on top of something that you're already happy with, because if you dilute your watercolors enough, it won't make that much of a difference. Like here, I'm building up more and more colors around the eyes, but it doesn't mean that I'm erasing what I already have on. I'm just adding more information. I know that I said I wanted to leave the ears very simple, but I still want to add a bit more intensity to that red and maybe create a little bit of sculptureness to the ears, just create a bit more information in them. And I thought about leaving the head like this, but I'm gonna give one more layer of blue. I know it's a bit confusing. I admit that it was a bit hard for me to understand the chin area. Didn't really know what to do. But I'm still gonna do one more layer of blue and purple just to darken it up, to make sure you know that that is the end of the face. And I am actually gonna paint some areas of the hair, not too much, just the bottom half. Still haven't decided what specific color I'm gonna be using. I recommend mixing your colors on your palette before you start painting, because if you run out, you're gonna have to try to mix the same color, and it might not be exactly the same. So yeah, try to do more paint mixture than you anticipate to use, so that doesn't happen. I didn't do this because I wasn't sure what color I wanted to use. I wanted to see how it looked in the painting and then decide if I wanted to look darker or lighter. In this case, I'm using a very greenish turquoise. I think it wouldn't look too nice if I just add a very dark green. I think it will sort of switch how prioritized the features of the face are. If I do a very dark color for something that isn't the key element of a portrait, it will have too much attention. It will bring too much attention to the area, and I want the really important part of the portrait to be the eyes and the nose, and the lips, just the features of the face, I guess. Also, about this intention sort of competition, I think that if I had like 2 more hours of painting, I could add enough contrast in the face, in the features, for me to add the whole hair and even the background. But because it's so subtle, I think that if I paint the background like blue or yellow, it will, I don't know, I think the portrait itself won't look that good. As you can see, I'm still deciding what I want this color to look like. I'm just adding water wherever I want the colors to look lighter, so I can dab it with a piece of clean tissue. Obviously, I'm not going to leave it this way. I'm going to do a layer on top and sort of blend that darker color from the top near the ear and the rest. But still, I don't know what I'm actually doing. I'm just dabbing and painting on top. Here I'm just doing it a bit greener than it was looking. Grabbing my smaller brush to be a bit more precise with the edges. Also a reminder, watercolors dry much lighter than how they look when they are wet, sorry. Also I'm going to grab that same green and do a layer on top of the eyebrows just to make them a bit darker. And again with the shadow from the bottom lip. think when you add a dark color in your portrait, you need to match that color to the rest of your portrait. So if you decide what is the darkest value and you pick one color to be that dark value, I like using that same color for that same value around the face. Here I'm adding even more red around the eyes. I'm using that same flat brush to do so, but I'm just switching to the smaller brush. I'm also sort of spreading that red stain into the nose, just to get rid of the light colors from the nose area, I guess. I'm sorry if I'm not explaining everything that I'm doing precisely. I hope you don't think this has any sense. I'm simply comparing my painting to the reference picture and adding layers of colors where I think it needs a bit more intensity. Just making the eyes a bit more red, or the lips a bit more pink, or the nose a bit more defined. With my smaller brush, I'm making the lash line a bit darker, a bit more visible, and it really doesn't matter the color you're using, because at this point, if you're using water diluted pigment, like your watercolor is not too thick, you won't paint on top of the already painted area. So if you have sort of a dark purple, like neutral purple, and you go on top with a very thin layer of yellow, you won't make that line yellow. It's just gonna add a touch of warmth to that already done purple. And now with my thin brush, I'm just being a bit more precise, adding thicker, more opaque layers of watercolor in certain areas, just to make it more defined, more deep. Especially the nostrils, the left ear, that isn't actually visible in the reference picture, but I just wanted to add a touch of red in that side of the face. And around the lips, just to limit the upper and bottom lip. Just to make the painting more interesting and versatile, I am adding pure yellow to the painting. We added ochre around some of the blended areas, but more as a gradient and just to add warmth to our color mixtures. But because the portrait is mostly pink and green, maybe adding that touch of yellow, that real yellow, will add sort of a interesting addition to the painting. Going with more yellow, more blue around the face, and even darkening a bit risky this that I'm doing. I wouldn't do this at the beginning of my painting, but at this point I really think I should add a bit more contrast to the cheeks. So I'm going a bit deeper, a bit more drastic with my colors. Oh, also I still and getting rid of some white areas of the portrait. Okay, I think I'm done. I'm not going to do the rest of the hair. I'm going to leave it sound like this. Yeah, I like it. I'm going to sign it with a pencil. I'm going to sign it in red. I really hate signing my paintings with a paintbrush. I hate it. It ends up ruining my paintings. And when I really like my painting, I don't want to do a signature with my paint. So I just use pencil in my oil paintings, in my gouache paintings, and in my watercolor paintings. And also forgive that I'm doing this with pencils. This is meant to be a watercolor portrait, so just ignore what I'm doing. I just want to show how you could layer on top some pencil on top of gouache or watercolor. Okay, so I'm not gonna keep working on it. I think it's pretty much done. I don't like it as much as the last one, but I am pretty satisfied with how it turned out. I think there's a very lovely contrast between the green and the pink. I hope you enjoyed the process, and I'll see you in the next video. Or if it's the last one, then happy painting, and until next time. Bye!